Good evening everyone. Myself Arnab Ganguly, Assistant Professor of Electrical Engineering Department in Gargi Memorial Institute of Technology College. So this is the class of Illumination Engineering of 8th semester students. Today our topics is factors of seeing. Now in our earlier class we already have discussed about the process of seeing and also the functioning of the eye. That means the photoreceptors and the constructions of the eye and how it is going to respond to the light coming in our eye and how it is going to do the functions. So in the case of photoreceptors, we know that there is rod and cone, two types of photoreceptors, and that is used, that is helps us about the proper visions. We also discuss about the photopic, scotopic and mesopic visions and the factors, that means the accommodations, adaptations and the selective response to the wavelength, that are the characteristics and the important factors for the functioning of eye. That means how it is going to accommodate the incident ray from the objects and also the adaptations to the backgrounds and the objects and also the selective response to the different wavelength, because we know that when we are considering about the light, so different lights, there is obviously the different wavelengths between the different colors. So in our visual spectrum, that is 380 nanometer to 780 nanometer, when we considering about the different colors of light, that is we are considering about red, yellow, green, blue, violet, cyan, magenta, orange, etc. Then obviously it is distinguished one from others with respect to its particular wavelength and also how we are going to percept seeds, because we know that when we are considering that a particular object has these types of color, then actually our eye is going to do the perceptions that this object consists of red color or blue color or violet color. So when we are considering about the different color, that means how our eye percepts about these, because we know that the object has no color. So that is the part of the color theories. We will discuss it later. Now firstly we will going to discuss about the factors of seeing. Now that is four factors primarily, that is size, contrast, time, luminance. So what is size? That means the object we are going to see, if the size is big, that means that is easier for us to see the object properly. It is very much clear. When we are considering about the contrast, so contrast is what? See, when we are considering about the contrast mathematically, we can write it in this manner, that is LB minus LT divided by LB. So what is LB? No, LB is the background luminance. So that means background luminance. When we are considering about LT, that means the task luminance or the object luminance. So when we are considering this, so contrast is such a thing, that means if the contrast, we say that the contrast is good, that means the background luminance is more than the task luminance or vice versa. So if that happen, then we see that contrast is good and that is very much easier to us to locate, to see the object properly when the contrast is proper. Now the another term is veiling reflections. So what happens, that is actually occurs and that actually affects our visibility, because if suppose we are considering about a ceiling of a room and a light from an object that is coming directly to our eyes rather than it is absorbed or reflect diffusely from the ceiling. If that's not happen, that is directly comes to our eye, then these veiling reflection factors affects our visibility. And obviously the contrast, that is also then going to be done in such a manner that the veiling reflections and these types of factors, that is when happens, that means the contrast between the background and the background and the task, the contrast factor is also going to be reduced. So when the contrast is going to reduce between the background and the object, that means the background and the task, then obviously it is difficult for us to see the object properly. So another thing is that is time. Suppose there is a screen that is coming in front of our eye, but that is disappears very much quickly. Then what happens? We cannot see the object properly because it disappears very much quickly. But if that particular screen appears and that persists for a long time, then obviously we can see the object properly. So this time factor is very much important factor when we are considering about the seeing. Now the luminance. So what is luminance? From the basic definitions of the illuminations technology, we get the definitions of illuminance and luminance. So we see that suppose this is a particular light source and this is the object. So the light source going to send the light in these directions. That means the radiated light comes here, that means here this is incidented, and then from this particular working plane that is reflected back to our eyes. That means this is us, the spectators, that's are going to see the particular object, and the lights coming from this light source, here it is incidented and then reflected from the objects to our eyes. So this factor, this reflected ray that is going from this object to our eyes, that is we call that luminance. Now when we are considering about the factors of seeing, that means this luminance has to be proper for a particular object. Now if the luminance is proper, that means the proper amount of light reflected from the object or from the working plane to our eye, that means we can see the object properly. Now suppose when we are considering about the road lighting, so a driver is going to drive a car, then what is his object? That means his object is to recognize the things that is comes in front of its car. So that means from that particular object the light has to be come to the driver's visions, that the driver is going to recognize the particular object from a particular distance. So that means this luminance is very much important for the factors of seeing. When we are considering about, that is for the road lighting or for interior lighting or whatever it may be. So luminance is very much important. Now these are the factors of seeing. Now suppose we are considering about a visual task. So visual task means the success depends upon the ability to perform the visual portion of the task. That means how we can going to see the object. So on that parameter the success depends. Suppose we are going to do a doctor is going to do a particular operations in a operations theater, then obviously the ability to his performance, that is very much dependent on this particular visibility level. And so for the every types of working, this visibility level is very much important. So the success that depends upon also the visibility level and the ability to perform the visual portion of the task. So when a person, suppose his eye that is in good conditions, that means his ability to perform the task is very much dependent upon the visibility level. So obviously when we are considering about the visual task, so this is very much important, and the visibility level and the success also depends on the visual characteristics of the task and the physical characteristics, that is very much important as the eye conditions. Suppose when a person is going to be aged, obviously with the increment of its age, the eye going to perform, the performance of eye going to be decreased, going to be bad. So obviously the physical characteristics of the observer is very much important thing. Now the factor color. So when we are considering about a color appearance, so this is very much important, that is color appearance. See, a particular person going to say a particular thing, that is this is bright red, and another person comes and see this particular object and say that no, that is not such bright, that is less bright. So why we are considering these same things, but two different person going to judge that color in different way, the brightness and the other things in different way, because that is the visual perceptions. And obviously the visual perceptions, that is also depends on the color appearance, how the color appeared to us. So when we are considered about the color appearance, so that is selective wavelength reflection or transmission of incident light. Already we discussed that the object has no color. Suppose we say that this is red, this is blue, this is green, but the object actually has no color. So why we are considering it as a red, blue, green or different types of color? Then that is the selective wavelength reflections or transmissions of incident light. So that particular wavelength reflections, that is the particular wavelength reflect from the object to our eye, and our eye perceives that and going to judge on that parameter that this is blue or this is red or this is green. So that is the selective wavelength reflections or transmissions of incident light. Now see, there is one theory, that is Young-Helmholtz theory, that is that any color can be synthesized by an unique mixture of three lights of different colors. What does it say? Any color can be synthesized by an unique mixture of three lights of different colors. But actually here these scientists actually say that if we are considering about three lights, we are considering primary colors, secondary colors. So if we are going to synthesize a particular unique color, so that is, we can say that, we can see that that is a unique mixture of three lights of different colors. But dependent on this theory, that is very much difficult to explain the perception of the single colors, because we already see that about that is a mixture of three different colors. So to get the particular perceptions of a single color, this is very much difficult. So then the color in letter, the color in our standard, the color is discussed, color is discussed in three way, that is the color itself, the color, the object color and the perceived object color. So what is color? See the definitions of color, that is characteristics of light by which an observer can distinguish between two structure free patches of light of same size and shape. So this is very much important, characteristics of light by which an observer can distinguish between two structure free patches of light. That means structure free patches of light that is going to incident on a particular area. So a observer going to distinguish between that two patches of same size and shape by the characteristics of light. So what is that characteristics? That is the color. So if we considering about these definitions, the outcome is that the spectral distributions of the radiant power of object. That means color, when we considering about a particular color, that is the spectral distributions of radiant power of object. That is how the distributions of the radiant power going to our visibility, that is we are going to perceive on that particular spectral distributions, that is dependent on how we perceive that, and we on that perceptions we say that this is red or this is blue or this is green or whatever it may be. Now suppose you can say that there is another very much important term, that is CRI. We already know that is CRI, that is color rendering index. So when we have discussed about the different lamps parameters, then we see that the CRI is not equal to the different lamps. Suppose a fluorescent lamp, the CRI is very much good, but a sodium vapor lamp CRI is not good, that is very much bad. And based on that parameter we say that as the sodium vapor lamp CRI is not good, so when we are using sodium vapor lamp we cannot distinguish, we cannot recognize the proper color of an object. And if the students going to do it practically, you also get the effects. So when you are going to the sodium vapor lamps region, then the proper object color cannot be recognized because the color rendering of index of this lamp is very much poor. So based on that, the fluorescent lamp color rendering index is very much good, and when we are considering about the fluorescent lamp use, then we can distinguish the color as when we are going to distinguish it in presence of daylight. So daylight, that means that is a standard natural light source, and the fluorescent lamp or these types of source are actually going to gives us the light in that flavor. So these are the standard source, and obviously we can detect the color under these types of source whose CRI is very much good, that is very much proper, we can recognize the color of any object. Now another thing is that the object color. So this is very much important, that is the color of the light reflected or transmitted by an object when illuminated by a standard CIE light source. That means a standard light source is defined by CIE, and under this light source the color of the light reflected or transmitted by an object when illuminated. So that means there is an object, we are going to illuminate it by a standard light source, and then the color of the light reflected from the source and we perceive that is the object color. So again I say that the object has no color because that is very much depends on the perception, that is very much depend on the color of light reflected or transmitted when that is illuminated under a standard light source. Now another is that is perceived object color. Perceived object color means the color perceived as belonging to an object resulting from the characteristics of the object, of the incident light and surround, the viewing directions and observers adaptations. And this is very much important terms for the lighting designer. A lighting designer is going to design a lighting for a particular area, for a particular purpose, to keep in mind about this perceived object color. That means that is very much also dependent on the moods. Suppose when we are considering about a hospital lounge or a particular hospital room, there is a particular types of lighting design. But when we are considering about a lighting design of a big ground, obviously the lighting design differs. When we are considering about a conference room light, obviously the lighting design differs, and that is also very much important, very much dependent on the moods of the viewer. So the perceived object color, that is very much important, the color perceived as belonging to an object, how we are going to adapt. So on that adaptation, it is very much important, that is the color perceived as belonging to an object resulting from the characteristics of the object. That means how we are going to see, we want to see that object. Of the incident light and the surround, obviously the background is very much important. When we are going to see something, the background is very much important. The viewing directions and the observer's adaptations. So these are the factors of the seeings, and obviously we also discuss about the basics of the color. In our next class, we will do the discussion about the colorimetry. Okay, thank you for today.